The morning mist clung to the mountains like a gray blanket, thick enough to hide secrets, but thin enough to let death slip through. Elena Vasquez adjusted her position behind the rocky outcrop, her breathing steady despite the weight of what lay ahead. 3 miles below, the enemy compound buzzed with activity, unaware that their most wanted target was about to meet his end. Elena had been tracking Viktor Kozlov for 8 months. The arms dealer had slipped through the fingers of international law enforcement more times than anyone cared to count. His network supplied weapons to terrorist organizations across 3 continents, and his personal body count reached into the thousands. Today, that would end. The radio in her ear crackled softly. "Phantom, this is Control. Target confirmed at location Alpha. Range is 2,847 meters. Wind speed varying between 8 and 12 knots from the southwest. You are clear to engage when ready." Elena smiled grimly. They called her Phantom for good reason. In 6 years of active service, she had never missed a shot that mattered. More importantly, she had never been seen taking one. Her reputation was built on impossibility. Shots that military experts claimed couldn't be made, targets eliminated from distances that shouldn't have been achievable with any known rifle. She adjusted the custom scope on her rifle, a weapon that existed in no official records. The modifications she had made over the years transformed it into something beyond standard military issue. The barrel was longer, the action smoother, and the internal mechanisms calibrated to her exact specifications. Every component had been tested under extreme conditions, and every shot had been calculated to achieve maximum accuracy at ranges that would make other snipers shake their heads in disbelief. The target appeared in her scope. Viktor Kozlov stood on the balcony of the main building, surrounded by 6 bodyguards. He was conducting a meeting with potential buyers, men whose faces appeared on wanted lists across multiple countries. Elena could see the briefcase of money changing hands, another deal that would put more weapons into the wrong hands. What made this shot extraordinary wasn't just the distance. The compound sat in a valley, surrounded by mountains, creating unpredictable wind patterns that could throw off even the most experienced marksman. The target would be visible for maybe 30 seconds before moving back inside the building. Elena would have one chance, and failure wasn't an option. She had spent 3 days studying the weather patterns, timing the wind shifts, and calculating the exact moment when all variables would align. Her position had been chosen after hiking 15 miles through hostile territory, carrying 60 pounds of equipment on her back. She hadn't eaten a hot meal or slept for more than 2 hours at a time since arriving in the region. Elena's training had begun 12 years earlier, when she was just 18 years old. Born in a small farming town in Montana, she had grown up hunting with her grandfather, a World War II veteran who taught her that shooting was more than just pulling a trigger. It required patience, discipline, and an understanding of the relationship between mind and body that most people never achieved. Her grandfather had been a sniper in the Pacific Theater, though he rarely spoke about his service. What he did share were the fundamentals: breathing control, trigger discipline, and the ability to remain perfectly still for hours at a time. He taught her to read the wind by watching grass bend and birds fly. He showed her how to estimate distances by studying shadows and calculating angles. When Elena enlisted in the Marines at 19, her drill instructors quickly recognized her natural ability. She could hit targets at distances that impressed even the most experienced marksmen. Her scores at boot camp broke records that had stood for over a decade. Within 2 years, she was recruited for specialized training that officially didn't exist. The program was designed to create soldiers capable of operating alone in hostile territory for extended periods. They learned advanced mathematics to calculate trajectory and windage under extreme conditions. They studied meteorology to predict weather changes that could affect their shots. They trained in languages, local customs, and survival techniques that would allow them to blend into any environment. Elena excelled in every aspect of the training, but her true gift was an almost supernatural ability to remain undetected. Instructors would place her in various scenarios, challenging her to eliminate targets without being spotted by opposition forces. Time after time, she would complete the mission and disappear without leaving any trace of her presence. Her first official mission took place in Afghanistan, where she was tasked with eliminating a Taliban commander who had been coordinating attacks on supply convoys. The target was known for his paranoia and never stayed in one location for more than a few hours. Elena tracked him for 2 weeks before finding the perfect opportunity. The shot was made from 1,400 meters during a sandstorm that reduced visibility to less than 50 feet. Military experts later analyzed the mission and declared it impossible. The conditions, the distance, and the target's constant movement should have made success unlikely. Elena's after-action report was classified at the highest levels, and she was quickly reassigned to even more sensitive operations. Over the next several years, she completed missions across the Middle East, Africa, and Eastern Europe. Each assignment involved targets that conventional forces couldn't reach through normal means. Terrorist leaders hiding in remote mountain caves, arms dealers conducting business in heavily fortified compounds, and corrupt officials who surrounded themselves with layers of security. Elena's methods became legendary among the small community of people who knew about her existence. She would spend weeks or even months preparing for a single shot. She studied her targets' routines, mapped their security protocols, and identified the exact moment of vulnerability that would allow her to succeed. What set her apart wasn't just her marksmanship skills. Elena had an intuitive understanding of human behavior that allowed her to predict her target's movements with uncanny accuracy. She could sense when someone was about to change direction, when a guard was about to look up, or when a target was about to step into the perfect position. Her colleagues in the intelligence community began to refer to her as a ghost. She would arrive at a location, complete her mission, and vanish without anyone knowing she had been there. Local authorities would find targets dead from impossible shots, leading to speculation about new weapons technology or foreign military intervention. Elena preferred the mystery. The less people knew about her capabilities, the more effective she could be in future operations. She cultivated an image of impossibility that made enemies paranoid and allies grateful. Her reputation grew through whispered stories and classified reports that described events that shouldn't have been possible. Now, lying in position on this mountain in Eastern Europe, Elena was about to attempt her most challenging shot yet. The distance was at the absolute limit of what her rifle could achieve. The weather conditions were constantly changing. The target would be exposed for less than 30 seconds. She controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow to the rhythm she had perfected over years of practice. The wind gauge showed a momentary lull in the gusts sweeping through the valley. Her finger moved to the trigger, applying pressure so gradually that the rifle seemed to fire itself. The bullet left the barrel at 2,800 feet per second, beginning a journey that would take nearly 4 seconds to complete. Elena watched through her scope as the projectile traveled through the air, adjusting its path as it encountered different wind currents and atmospheric pressures. Kozlov was reaching for a glass of vodka when the bullet found its target. The impact was immediate and final. His bodyguards looked around in confusion, unable to identify where the shot had come from. By the time they organized a search of the surrounding mountains, Elena was already packing her equipment. She moved through the rocky terrain like a shadow, following an escape route she had planned during her initial reconnaissance. Her extraction point was 12 miles away, requiring her to navigate through hostile territory while carrying all of her gear. The radio chatter from the compound filled her earpiece as enemy forces tried to make sense of what had happened. They couldn't understand how someone had made an impossible shot from an unknown location. Search teams were dispatched in multiple directions, but they were looking for a traditional sniper hide that didn't exist. Elena smiled as she disappeared into the mountains, another mission completed without leaving any trace of her presence. In a few hours, she would be on a transport plane heading home, while intelligence agencies around the world struggled to explain how Viktor Kozlov had been eliminated by a shooter who apparently didn't exist. 6 months after the Kozlov elimination, Elena received an assignment that would challenge everything she thought she knew about her own capabilities. The target was Hassan al-Rashid, a terrorist mastermind who had orchestrated bombings across Europe and was planning something catastrophic for the upcoming Olympic Games. The problem wasn't just al-Rashid himself. He had learned from the mysterious deaths of other high-value targets and had developed security protocols specifically designed to counter long-range threats. His compound in the Syrian desert featured multiple decoy buildings, constantly changing schedules, and advanced detection equipment that could identify threats from distances previously considered safe. Elena studied the intelligence reports from her apartment in Quantico, Virginia. The photos showed a fortress-like complex surrounded by open desert for miles in every direction. Heat signatures indicated the presence of thermal detection systems, and communications intercepts revealed guard rotations that changed every few hours according to random patterns. What made this mission nearly impossible was the distance requirement. The nearest concealment that wouldn't trigger the compound sensors was over 3,200 meters away. At that range, she would be shooting at the absolute limit of her equipment's capabilities. A shot that distance would take over 5 seconds to reach its target, allowing enough time for even small changes in wind or target movement to cause a complete miss. Elena's commanding officer, Colonel Marcus Webb, had been reluctant to assign a mission. He had worked with Elena for 4 years and trusted her abilities completely, but even he questioned whether this shot was achievable by any human being. The other agencies want to use a drone strike, Webb explained during their briefing. The Air Force is confident they can take out the entire compound with minimal collateral damage. But al-Rashid has children and civilians in the area. We need surgical precision. Elena nodded, understanding the implications. A missed shot or collateral damage would create an international incident. The mission required eliminating one specific target while leaving everyone else unharmed. It was exactly the type of challenge that had made her reputation, but the technical requirements pushed every boundary of what was possible. She spent 2 weeks preparing for the mission, focusing on equipment modifications that would give her every possible advantage. Working with the military's top ballistics experts, she developed specialized ammunition designed to maintain stability over extreme distances. The bullets were manufactured to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch, with each round tested for perfect weight distribution and aerodynamic properties. Her rifle received similar attention to detail. The barrel was replaced with a custom-made component that was 3 inches longer than standard military issue. New internal mechanisms reduced vibration and improved consistency between shots. A specialized scope provided magnification capabilities that allowed her to identify targets at distances that would be invisible to normal equipment. Elena also modified her own preparation routine. She increased her cardiovascular training to ensure her heart rate could remain steady under extreme stress. She practiced meditation techniques that allowed her to enter a state of complete mental focus. She studied advanced meteorology to better predict wind patterns in desert environments. The insertion took place during a new moon, providing maximum darkness for her approach. Elena parachuted from 25,000 feet, landing 15 miles from her target area. She carried 80 pounds of equipment, including her rifle, ammunition, water for 3 days, and specialized gear for surviving in the desert heat. The hike to her shooting position required crossing terrain that would challenge experienced mountaineers. Rocky outcrops provided some concealment, but much of the route lay across open ground where detection would mean certain death. Elena moved only during the coolest hours before dawn, using night vision equipment to navigate while avoiding security patrols. Her chosen position was a natural cave formation that provided concealment while offering a clear line of sight to the target compound. The cave was barely large enough for one person, requiring her to remain in a cramped position for potentially days while waiting for the perfect opportunity. Elena arrived at the position 36 hours before the planned shot, giving her time to study the target's routine and confirm her calculations. She observed guard changes, noting that al-Rashid appeared on a specific balcony each morning for exactly 90 seconds while reviewing reports from his lieutenants. The weather conditions were more challenging than anything she had previously encountered. Desert winds created temperature differentials that caused bullet trajectories to shift unpredictably. Sand particles in the air could deflect projectiles, and heat mirages made accurate range finding nearly impossible during daylight hours. Elena spent hours calculating the mathematical equations that would determine her shot. She measured wind speed and direction at multiple points along the bullet's path, using portable weather stations to gather data about atmosphere pressure and humidity. She studied thermal patterns to predict how temperature changes would affect her ammunition's performance. The night before the planned shot, Elena received updated intelligence that changed everything about her mission. Communications intercepts revealed that Al-Rashid was planning to leave the compound the following afternoon, moving to a new location that would put him beyond reach for months. Her window of opportunity had shrunk to a single morning appearance. Elena checked and rechecked her equipment throughout the night. She cleaned her rifle with obsessive precision, ensuring that every component functioned perfectly. She arranged her ammunition according to temperature, selecting the rounds that would perform best under the current atmospheric conditions. She practiced her breathing exercises until her heart rate remained steady, even while imagining the pressure of the upcoming shot. As the sun rose over the Syrian desert, Elena prepared to attempt the longest confirmed kill shot in military history. The target compound shimmered in the morning heat, creating optical illusions that made accurate ranging extremely difficult. Her scope showed multiple heat signatures moving through the buildings, but identifying which one was Al-Rashid would require perfect timing and exceptional skill. At exactly 0647 hours, Elena saw her target emerge onto the balcony. Al-Rashid was wearing traditional robes that made him difficult to distinguish from his bodyguards, but Elena recognized his distinctive walk and posture from hours of surveillance footage. He carried a briefcase that intelligence reports indicated contained plans for the Olympic attack. Elena's scope showed Al-Rashid standing next to two other men, all of them partially concealed by the building's architecture. The shot would need to be precise enough to eliminate the target without hitting anyone else, despite the extreme distance and challenging conditions. She controlled her breathing, feeling her body enter the state of perfect calm that had become second nature after years of practice. Her finger found the trigger, applying pressure so gradually that the moment of firing seemed to happen without conscious decision. The rifle's recoil pushed against her shoulder as the bullet began its journey across the desert. For 5.2 seconds, Elena watched through her scope as the projectile traveled toward its target. She could see the heat shimmer around the compound, the movement of guards on the perimeter, and the three figures standing on the balcony. Time seemed suspended as physics and mathematics combined to determine whether months of preparation would result in success or failure. Al-Rashid was turning to speak to one of his companions when the bullet struck him center mass. The impact was immediate and final. His bodyguards looked around in confusion, unable to comprehend what had happened. The briefcase fell from his hands, spilling documents that contained detailed plans for attacks on Olympic venues. Elena was already moving before the sound of her shot could echo across the desert. She packed her equipment with practiced efficiency, transforming from sniper to ghost in less than 90 seconds. Her extraction route led through a series of wadis that provided concealment from aerial surveillance. The radio chatter from the compound confirmed what Elena already knew. Al-Rashid was dead, and his security team had no idea where the shot had come from. Search helicopters were launched immediately, but they were looking for threats within normal engagement ranges. No one suspected that the shooter had been positioned over 2 miles away. Elena reached her extraction point 18 hours later, having traveled 35 miles through hostile territory while carrying all of her equipment. A submarine waited offshore to take her home, leaving behind another mystery that intelligence agencies would struggle to explain for years to come. The success of the Al-Rashid elimination brought Elena to the attention of the highest levels of government, but it also marked the beginning of the most dangerous period of her career. Intelligence agencies around the world had begun to notice a pattern in the impossible assassinations that were eliminating their most wanted targets. Someone with extraordinary capabilities was operating outside normal military channels. Elena's next assignment came directly from the Director of National Intelligence. The target was Dmitry Volkov, a Russian oligarch who had been funneling money to separatist groups and was secretly developing chemical weapons in violation of international treaties. Volkov was scheduled to attend a peace conference in Geneva, providing the first opportunity in years to eliminate him without starting a diplomatic crisis. The challenge wasn't just the target himself. Volkov traveled with a security detail that included former Spetsnaz operators and electronic countermeasures designed to defeat conventional assassination attempts. His hotel suite was on the 32nd floor of a building surrounded by other high-rises, creating a three-dimensional puzzle of angles and sightlines. More concerning was the intelligence suggesting that foreign agents were actively hunting for the mysterious sniper who had been eliminating high-value targets. Elena's perfect record of undetected kills had made her a priority target for enemy intelligence services. Taking this shot would expose her to risks that went far beyond the normal dangers of her profession. Elena studied the target area from her temporary base in Zurich, using surveillance photos and satellite imagery to plan an approach that would give her the best possible shot while maintaining multiple escape routes. The conference was being held at the Hotel Metropole, a prestigious establishment that catered to international diplomats and business leaders. The building's architecture presented unique challenges. Traditional sniper positions on surrounding rooftops would be easily detected by Volkov's security team and Swiss police. The conference room windows were bulletproof, eliminating the possibility of shooting through glass. Elena would need to wait for Volkov to appear on one of the building's exterior balconies, which intelligence reports suggested happened twice daily when he stepped outside to make secure phone calls. Elena's chosen position was a construction site 8 blocks away, where a new office building was being erected. The incomplete structure provided concealment while offering an unobstructed view of the hotel. At 1,247 meters, the shot was within her proven capabilities, but the urban environment created wind patterns that were impossible to predict with conventional methods. She arrived in Geneva 3 days before the conference, posing as a freelance photographer documenting the city's architecture. Her equipment bags contained a camera and telephoto lenses that provided cover for her actual mission gear. The rifle was broken down into components that appeared to be photographic equipment when examined by security personnel. Elena spent hours observing the target area, timing the movements of security patrols, and identifying the exact moments when Volkov would be vulnerable. She noted that Swiss police had increased their presence around the hotel, but their focus was on ground-level threats rather than long-range sniper fire. The construction site required careful reconnaissance to ensure she could operate without being detected by workers or security cameras. Elena identified a position on the 15th floor that provided the necessary angle, while keeping her hidden from casual observation. She cached her equipment during the night before the shot, concealing it among the construction materials. On the morning of the assassination, Elena arrived at the construction site before dawn, dressed as a worker and carrying identification that would pass casual inspection. She had memorized the building's layout and knew the locations of every security camera and potential witness. Her rifle was assembled quickly in the pre-dawn darkness, each component fitting together with the precision that came from thousands of hours of practice. The weapon had been modified specifically for urban environments, with a suppressor that would reduce the sound signature and muzzle flash that could reveal her position. Elena's scope provided a clear view of the hotel's exterior, but the complexity of the urban environment meant that her bullet would need to travel between buildings and around obstacles that could affect its trajectory. She had calculated multiple possible paths, depending on which balcony Volkov chose to use. At 0847 hours, Elena observed her target emerging onto the hotel's eastern balcony. Volkov was speaking on a satellite phone, apparently conducting business that couldn't wait for the conference to begin. He stood near the balcony's edge, providing a clear shot despite the presence of 2 bodyguards. Elena had studied Volkov's routine for weeks, noting that he typically spent between 60 and 90 seconds on these calls. The security detail would scan the surrounding buildings, but their focus was on nearby rooftops rather than distant positions. Elena would have one opportunity to take the shot before Volkov returned to the safety of his suite. The wind conditions were more challenging than Elena had anticipated. Gusts were funneling between the buildings, creating turbulence that could throw off even perfectly aimed shots. She waited for a momentary lull in the air currents, timing her shot to coincide with the most favorable conditions. Elena controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate stabilize at the rhythm that had become automatic after years of training. Her finger moved to the trigger, applying pressure with a gradual precision that separated expert marksmen from merely competent shooters. The rifle seemed to fire itself, the recoil barely disturbing her position. The bullet traveled its predetermined path through the urban canyon, maintaining its trajectory despite the complex air currents. Elena watched through her scope as Volkov continued his phone conversation, unaware that death was approaching at 2,700 feet per second. The impact occurred exactly as Elena had calculated. Volkov dropped instantly, his phone clattering across the balcony floor. His bodyguards immediately moved to shield his body while scanning the surrounding buildings for threats. Swiss police began cordoning off the area within minutes, but they were searching for a shooter positioned much closer to the target. Elena was already disassembling her rifle before Volkov's bodyguards could organize their response. She packed her equipment with practiced efficiency, transforming back into a photographer who had been documenting the city's morning light. Her escape route led through the construction site service elevator to a parking garage where a motorcycle waited. The ride through Geneva's narrow streets provided perfect cover for her extraction. Elena followed a route that avoided security cameras while leading away from the target area. She reached a safe house on the city's outskirts within 30 minutes of taking the shot, where new identification and a change of clothes waited. International media coverage of Volkov's assassination focused on the mystery surrounding his death. Security experts couldn't explain how a sniper had managed to eliminate such a well-protected target from an unknown position. The Swiss police investigation would continue for months without identifying any credible suspects. Elena's success, however, came with an unexpected consequence. Intelligence intercepts revealed that foreign agencies had begun actively hunting for the phantom sniper who had been eliminating their assets. Russian intelligence services were offering substantial rewards for any information about the mysterious marksman, and they were reportedly close to identifying patterns that could lead to Elena's exposure. Her commanding officer, Colonel Webb, expressed concern about Elena's continued operations. "They're getting closer to figuring out who you are," he warned during a secure video conference. "Maybe it's time to consider reassignment to a less exposed position." Elena understood the risks, but she also knew that her unique capabilities made her irreplaceable for certain types of missions. There were targets that couldn't be eliminated through conventional means, threats that required the precise application of force that only she could provide. Her next assignment would prove to be the most dangerous yet. Intelligence reports indicated that a North Korean weapons scientist was preparing to defect with information about a new biological weapon program. The extraction was scheduled to take place in Beijing, where the scientist would be under constant surveillance by multiple intelligence agencies. Elena's mission was to provide overwatch for the extraction team, eliminating any threats that might prevent the scientist from reaching safety. The operation would take place in one of the most surveilled cities in the world, where a single mistake could trigger an international incident. As Elena prepared for the Beijing mission, she couldn't shake the feeling that her luck was running out. Every successful shot brought her closer to exposure, and every mission increased the likelihood that her enemies would finally identify the ghost who had been haunting their operations. The Beijing assignment would require all of her skills and experience, but it would also test whether she could continue operating as the world's most wanted unknown sniper. The target wasn't just another high-value elimination. It was a mission that could determine the balance of power between nations. Elena checked her equipment one final time, knowing that this mission might be her last. The rifles were cleaned and calibrated, the ammunition was precisely manufactured, and her escape routes were planned to the smallest detail. She had spent 8 years building a reputation for impossible shots and perfect disappearances. Now she would discover whether that reputation would be enough to survive when the entire world was looking for her. The Beijing operation began with Elena's most complex insertion yet. She arrived in China using a cover identity as a documentary filmmaker, complete with a crew and equipment that would provide plausible reasons for being in various locations throughout the city. The deception required months of preparation and the cooperation of intelligence assets who had been building this cover for over a year. Dr. Kim Sung-ho was scheduled to defect during a scientific conference at Beijing University. The North Korean weapons scientist carried information about a biological weapons program that could shift the global balance of power. Multiple intelligence agencies knew about his planned defection, making the extraction extremely dangerous for everyone involved. Elena's mission was to provide security overwatch from a distance, eliminating any threats that might compromise the operation. The challenge was operating in a city with one of the world's most sophisticated surveillance systems. Facial recognition cameras, electronic monitoring, and human intelligence networks made Beijing a nightmare for covert operations. Her position needed to provide coverage of 3 different locations: the conference venue, the safe house where Dr. Kim would be debriefed, and the airport where he would be extracted. Elena identified a construction site that offered sight lines to all 3 areas, but reaching it undetected would require navigation through heavily monitored urban terrain. The equipment requirements were unlike anything Elena had dealt with previously. She needed a rifle capable of precision shots at varying distances, from 800 meters to over 2,000 meters. The weapon had to be portable enough for rapid repositioning while maintaining the accuracy needed for surgical strikes in a crowded urban environment. Elena's technical team developed a modular rifle system that could be configured for different mission requirements. The barrel length, stock configuration, and optical systems could be changed in under 2 minutes, allowing her to optimize the weapon for each potential shot. The ammunition was manufactured to provide consistent performance across the range of distances she might encounter. 3 days before the operation, Elena received intelligence that changed everything about the mission. Chinese security forces had identified Dr. Kim as a potential defector and were planning to arrest him before he could reach the extraction point. Worse, North Korean agents were already in Beijing with orders to eliminate the scientist if they couldn't prevent his defection. Elena's role expanded from security overwatch to active threat elimination. She would need to neutralize multiple targets while protecting Dr. Kim and the extraction team. The mission timeline was compressed to 18 hours, requiring split-second coordination between multiple moving elements. The conference began at 0900 hours on a Tuesday morning. Elena was positioned in her hide site by 0600, having moved through the city using routes that avoided the most heavily monitored areas. Her documentary crew provided cover for her movement, with team members positioned to warn her about approaching security patrols. Dr. Kim's presentation was scheduled for 1,400 hours, followed by a reception where he would make contact with the extraction team. Elena observed the conference venue through her scope, noting the positions of Chinese security personnel and identifying potential threats among the attendees. At 1,147 hours, Elena spotted the first North Korean operative. The man was positioned on a rooftop 400 meters from the conference venue, armed with a rifle and clearly preparing to eliminate Dr. Kim when he emerged from building. Elena calculated the range and wind conditions, preparing for her first shot of the day. The North Korean sniper was well-trained and had chosen his position carefully, but he wasn't expecting to be under observation from such an extreme distance. Elena's shot struck him center mass, eliminating the threat before he could acquire his target. The suppressed rifle produced minimal sound signature, and the North Korean fell behind the roofTop's parapet where his body wouldn't be discovered for hours. Elena immediately began scanning for additional threats, knowing that North Korean operations typically involved multiple team members. She identified 2 more operatives positioned near the conference venue's exits, both armed and apparently coordinating their movements through radio communications. Dr. Kim emerged from the conference building at 1,426 hours, surrounded by a protection detail that included both Chinese security officers and undercover extraction team members. Elena watched through her scope as the group moved toward a waiting vehicle, noting the positions of potential threats in the surrounding area. The second North Korean operative revealed himself when he began moving to intercept Dr. Kim's route to the vehicle. Elena acquired the target at 1,100 meters, accounting for the complex wind patterns created by the urban environment. Her shot eliminated the threat just as he was raising his weapon toward the scientist. The third operative was more cautious, remaining in concealment while apparently waiting for a better opportunity. Elena tracked his position through her scope, but he was partially hidden behind concrete barriers that prevented a clean shot. She would need to wait for him to expose himself or risk hitting innocent civilians. Dr. Kim reached the extraction vehicle safely, but the convoy immediately came under attack from a fourth North Korean team that had been positioned along the planned route. Elena watched as the lead vehicle was struck by an improvised explosive device, forcing the convoy to take an alternate route that brought them into her field of fire. The alternate route took the convoy past a construction site where Chinese security forces had established a checkpoint. Elena realized that Dr. Kim was about to be captured by Chinese agents who had been waiting for exactly this contingency. The extraction was falling apart, and the scientist's life depended on her ability to neutralize multiple threats simultaneously. Elena's first target was the Chinese checkpoint commander, who was directing his men to surround the convoy. The shot was taken at 1,347 meters through a gap between construction cranes, requiring precise timing to avoid hitting support beams that could deflect the bullet. The commander dropped immediately, causing confusion among his subordinates. The convoy used the momentary chaos to accelerate through the checkpoint, but they were now heading directly toward the position of the remaining North Korean operative. Elena tracked the hidden sniper through her scope, waiting for him to reveal himself when the convoy came into his range. The North Korean emerged from concealment just as the convoy reached the optimal killing zone. Elena's shot struck him before he could fire, but the bullet's trajectory took it between two civilians who were walking nearby. The margin of error was less than 6 inches, requiring the kind of precision that separated Elena from every other sniper in the world. Dr. Kim's convoy reached the airport extraction point 47 minutes behind schedule, but they arrived safely thanks to Elena's intervention. The scientist was loaded onto a diplomatic aircraft that had been waiting with engines running, ready for immediate departure once the extraction was complete. Elena was packing her equipment when she received an urgent radio transmission. Chinese security forces had identified the location of her shots and were moving to surround the construction site. Multiple vehicles were approaching her position, and she had less than 10 minutes before they would have the building completely surrounded. Her escape plan required reaching the roof of the construction site, where a helicopter extraction had been arranged as a last resort. Elena moved through the unfinished building with practiced efficiency, carrying her equipment while avoiding detection by the Chinese forces that were entering the lower floors. The helicopter arrived just as Chinese agents reached the roof access, forcing Elena to execute a running extraction under direct observation. She attached herself to the aircraft's winch cable and was lifted away from the building while small arms fire erupted from the rooftop below. The helicopter flew at low altitude through Beijing's urban landscape, using the city's skyline to mask its movement from radar detection. Elena was transferred to a larger aircraft at a secure airfield 30 minutes later, beginning her journey home while Chinese authorities struggled to make sense of what had happened. The Beijing operation was Elena's last official mission. Intelligence agencies around the world had finally begun to piece together enough information to identify patterns in her operations. Her cover identities were compromised, her methods had been analyzed, and continuing active operations would expose her to unacceptable risks. Colonel Webb offered her a position training other snipers, sharing her knowledge with the next generation of specialists who would carry on her mission. Elena accepted the assignment, knowing that her days as an active operator had come to an end. But Her legend continued to grow in the intelligence community. Stories of the phantom sniper who could make impossible shots and disappear without a trace became part of the folklore that motivated young soldiers and operatives. Her record of successful missions remained unbroken, and her methods continued to be studied by military tacticians worldwide. Elena retired to a small ranch in Montana, not far from where her grandfather had taught her to shoot decades earlier. She maintained the skills that had made her the world's most effective sniper, but she used them now for peaceful purposes, teaching marksmanship to local law enforcement and passing on the lessons she had learned. The rifle that had made her famous was locked away in a secure facility, along with classified records of missions that wouldn't be declassified for 50 years. Elena had become a ghost in more ways than one. Her name appeared in no public records. Her face was known to fewer than a dozen people, and her achievements would remain secret until long after she was gone. But on quiet evenings when the wind was still and the mountains cast long shadows, Elena would sometimes take out a hunting rifle and fire a single shot at a distant target. The bullet would find its mark with the same precision that had made her legend, reminding her of the years when she had been the most feared and unknown sniper in the world. The world remained a dangerous place, filled with threats that required surgical precision to eliminate. New snipers were being trained to carry on Elena's mission, using techniques she had developed and refined through years of impossible shots. Her legacy lived on in every mission they completed and every target they eliminated. Elena Vasquez had disappeared as completely as if she had never existed, leaving behind only the memory of shots that shouldn't have been possible and a reputation that would inspire generations of warriors who fought in the shadows to keep the world safe from those who would do it harm.